Madam President. I have prepared some remarks just because I'm probably not as articulate as Mr. Williams. But first of all, I just wanted to say that I have the utmost respect for Dr. Wilson and the Sports Medicine Committee. Their intent is to protect our athletes and to slow down and stop the spread of COVID-19 by reducing events and opportunities for students and people to get together. They and other members of the medical community have worked tirelessly over the past 10 months, and for that I am greatly appreciative. But I do believe that canceling the winter sports in our high schools does not provide the stop that SMAC is trying for. In fact, much like when you dam a river, the water has to go somewhere, and the same is true of our students. We can cancel winter sports in the high schools, but that will not stop our athletes from participating. Already, the Arizona Basketball Coaches Association and the Arizona Youth Soccer Association have reached out to our communities, offering opportunities to play. Churches and other sites have opened their doors to provide places to play. So we can cancel sports on our campuses, but they will still play. For those who don't play, I guarantee that they will get together with their friends, hang out, be less than 6 feet apart without masks. Some students may use the extra time on their hands to participate in activities that will get them in trouble. And that's not even taking into consideration the social and emotional issues and struggles that Mr. Williams referred to. As I stated on Friday, I believe the safest and best place for our students is at school. We as educators can guide and influence them to make positive decisions and practice the CDC guidelines of washing their hands, sanitizing, wearing a mask, and social distancing. And while I do not like to be in the position of disagreeing with SMAC, I think it is important that we carefully weigh what's before us today. You know, until our governor makes some changes and cancels all youth sports, I do feel like to stop at the high school level does not stop or change the problem. It simply changes the flow. So taking into consideration this and the wishes of the schools in the 4A conference, I will vote to reinstate winter sports. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brandel. I appreciate those comments. Mr. Duarte, are you out there, sir? I am going to lend to you.
Yes, I'm going to make this short and sweet. I do want everyone on this meeting to know that this was taken extremely serious, as it should be. Although I know the students are the focal point of everything we've discussed up to this point, there are other individuals involved. A lot of the stuff that has been set up to this point, some of it can be backed by data. And I somewhat agree with Marcus and I somewhat agree with Janine, but some of it isn't backed by data. And the data to me shows that up to this point, people in Arizona, as we've seen, we've become #1 in the world as the hot spot. I don't go out to ask ADs for doctors' advice on my, everyone included in this equation would be not fair to everyone. I believe ignoring the SMAC committee's recommendation is a mistake. I think we all have the best interest of the people involved to some extent from whatever viewpoint you come from. However, we reach this level to some extent by not adhering to the recommendations. I do believe that you do things, they're hanging out with friends as we speak. So I don't think there's any ability to stop that. I do think our coaches, athletic directors, administrators do a great job of mitigating it in their schools. However, my vote remains no.
Thank you, Mr. Duarte. Dr. Munoz.
Thank you, President Corona. I'd like to start as a representative of the 6A conference to mention we did take a vote yesterday, and the majority of the schools in the 6A conference voted to continue with winter sports. Concerns from them, and you may have heard already, that if we do not hold a winter season, and I think Ms. Brandel spoke to this, kids will end up in clubs, and that'll take over an alternative for students and parents, so that our schools would prefer to control the environment rather than to leave it open to clubs. There has been, so that was also shared. I also want to share that in the short time that we've had practices, according to some of the ADs that I spoke to yesterday, they're already seeing spikes in cases, shutting down teams. We're not even in full swing with winter sports. And they're saying that the spike is much higher and much more severe than what they've seen in the fall sports. In addition, our region chairs reported that parents are continually or not disclosing COVID cases when students are exposed or confirmed positive in order to circumnavigate the protocols and quarantines to avoid shutting down teams and or programs. That has been an issue. It's not reporting. And this has in turn created positive cases in its wake. The fact of the matter is, there's not one AIA member school in this state that wouldn't want to see a winter sports season happen this year, if not for the spiking COVID numbers. So it's unfair and a misrepresentation to pit districts and schools that would like to compete against those who do not at this point. It's impossible to ignore the fact that the COVID numbers in Arizona are higher in the US and the world at this time. Every county is in a substantial transmission range in infections per 100,000 and positivity rates and hospitalizations. Today was over 9,000 infections were reported and 300 plus deaths were reported today. The spike in COVID transmissions has quadrupled the numbers as compared to fall season at this point. At this point, the SMAC, with support of the 2,200 Arizona Academy of Family Physicians members, has reiterated their stance that we should cancel winter sports until we meet the established metrics that were set up in the fall season. I also want to share that students, and this has been spoken to before, are not encountering and also are asymptomatic in many cases. The issue is that this type of spread is occurring to our families, to our staff, to our coaches and officials, which have also attributed to many deaths in our adult populations. The final piece I want to make is enforcements of protocols and practices and events has not been consistently enforced, and it's contributed to the spread and our quarantines among communities. So I pray and hope that things will get better and that we're able to try to do something, but at this time, I will not be changing my vote.
Thank you, Dr. Munoz. Mr. Dean.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the time, and I'll too try to be short. I would like to also state that I've advisory committee, some of whom I know very well and personally, and hold them in the highest of regards. I also have great respect for every member of this executive board, and believe that it's important to note that in times of difficult decisions, respect is a key value that moves us forward. And I appreciate that the board has continued to operate under a value of respect. I would just also finally, in that regard, echo the conversations related to Mr. Hines, and that is that just in general, what this world could use right now is more kindness. And so I think that's an important of a winter season that athletes were going to play regardless of the decision of the board. We have seen that come true in the course of 24 hours after our vote. Both the CDC and Maricopa County Health Department in their research have found that COVID-19 is not spreading between students at schools. Schools are not super spreader events. The CDC director, as I stated last week, recently said that the safest place for students, in his belief, was in schools. Schools have mitigation plans in place for both students while they're in the classroom and with their athletic programs. Extracurricular athletics for high schools are voluntary for parents, and we have made this year an exception for schools to allow them to have voluntary participation in the AIA seasons. Athletes are going to play. In addition to the athletic opportunities for students, it also contributes to their social and emotional well-being of the students and others as well. On behalf of the 5A conference, I will continue to support our students participating in the winter season, and will vote yes on holding a winter season.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Carter, I will turn to you at this time.
Thank you, Madam President. Appreciate the opportunity. I would like, if possible, for you to indulge me a little bit from the standpoint that I think in reading literally hundreds of emails, it's very obvious to me that there are lots of folks out there that simply do not understand the focus and the makeup of our executive board. So if I can take just a moment to let everybody know that when this association was created and maintained through today, that it is an association of member schools. And that's important for people to realize. This is a organization that deals with individual schools who want to participate in extracurricular and co-curricular activities. And that was exactly why this organization was designed. The leadership of this organization is centered around a couple of bodies. The first one is the Legislative Council, which creates our policies. And this is not necessarily something that would impact this decision. This particular decision is a decision of the executive board, which is the group that has the ability to make determinations, are either elected or appointed by different organizations. So you've heard already from several of our conference representatives. So you have 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A, and 6A, and those individual conferences selected member from their ranks to represent them on this board. So there are 6 votes right there that represent individual groups of schools, whether they're tiny or whether they're the largest that we have. You then have 4 other organizations that are represented. You have the Arizona School Administrators who are represented. They typically represent our assistant principals, our principals, and our superintendents. As you've already heard, the AIAAA has a representative, and those are the folks that represent our athletic directors. We also know that the Arizona School Boards Association has a representative and an organization called Cognia. Cognia is our accrediting agency, and our schools that are members of the AIA are members of Cognia. So we all have a common interest. We are all supportive partners, and we all try to work together the very best we can for the benefit of kids and schools. And so I hope that helps a little bit with people's understanding as to how each of these folks got their seat. You don't necessarily run for these seats. In general, you're probably asked to serve representing that organization. And so from that standpoint, it truly is a volunteer organization. Last Friday, I gave 6 reasons for my vote to discontinue or not to start winter sports. The first one is, if you look at the science, if you look at the data, there's no decision to make. It's red, red, red. If we were being required to follow the data, we wouldn't be having this conversation. There just wouldn't be any need, because our schools would be in as close to lockdown as we could possibly get them. Second, as you've heard, Arizona is leading the world right now in the number of cases. And we believe that's going to continue for some time. And the CDC is telling us that it's probably going to be facing us for up to another 2 years, depending on what happens with the vaccinations. One of the things that Cognia is concerned about, and certainly I am concerned about it, and I've expressed this to the other members of the board on many occasions. When this organization was created, one of the things that was determined is that the athletic program, the extracurricular programs, and the co-curricular programs of schools is an extension of the school. So athletics is an extension of the academic program. That's what differentiates it from club sports. That's what differentiates it from Little League and Pop Warner. It is an extension of the school academic program. And so we need to think about it a little differently than we normally would. There is no relationship between a high school athletic program and a travel team that a child might play on. The fourth item is that if we follow that idea that the interscholastic activities are an extension of the academic program, then we need to realize that with a majority of our school districts and charter schools in Arizona in virtual mode, where they're not on campus, many of the teachers are not on campus, they are basically at home. And I have governing board members and I have members of the public say, then how in the world can we possibly be competing if our kids can't even be in a classroom with a teacher? And that's a valid point. It's very hard to be able to not take the recommendation of SMAC. And in addition to SMAC, I have had hundreds of emails from medical doctors and other practitioners who are saying that they support the recommendations that the SMAC committee has made. And our own statewide athletic trainers, the people that work with our athletes right there on campus, right on the sidelines, are telling us the same thing. They're recommending we follow the SMAC recommendations too. So there are 6 very valid reasons why people are voting no, we shouldn't continue with a winter season. So in closing, I think everybody on this board, and I think probably a great majority of people on this Zoom call, want what's best for students. They want what's best for high schools. And I think they want what's best for the Arizona Interscholastic Association, because we're all in this together. We have to realize that we can be honorable people and we can disagree. We don't have to dislike one another. This doesn't have to become personal, and it shouldn't. And in all 11 of those board meetings, board members were dealing with exactly the same thing we're dealing with right now. They're in a no-win situation. Half of the people in the room want the school closed. Half of the people in the room want the school open. And those board members had to make a judgment. And there were a lot of split votes. And ladies and gentlemen, nobody has to take this personally. We can all be honorable as what they think is the right thing, and the chips are going to fall where they fall. As a result, I will continue my vote from last Friday to not have winter sports. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. I appreciate the additional information on the role and the makeup of the board. At this time, I turn to Mr. Love, as he was the maker of the motion to reconsider the original.
Well, I represent the Arizona School Boards Association, which is made up of all of the school boards in Arizona. As school boards, we difficult at times have 50% of the people saying open the schools, 50% saying close the schools. And that's what I'm reading in the emails that I'm getting from all of you. is about 50% of the people that are contacting me, some even personally, because they happen to have my cell phone number, are telling me, do not play. I also,
Missing off your video to see if that will assist. And thank you. I lost him off of my screen. Did you, Taylor? Perhaps he's going to log out and log back in. With that, we will come back to Mr. Love, and I would like to turn now to Mr. Greer, sorry. Goodness sakes, wrong day. Ricky.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll try to keep this somewhat brief because I do echo what you have heard already from Mr. Duarte, Mr. Carter, and Dr. Munoz. I feel like I'm in a fairly unique situation because, yes, I do represent the 2A conference on the board, but I've also been asked and charged to represent many of our schools throughout the state of Arizona that the majority of their population are Native American students, and also along with that, rural Arizona. One of my major concerns being in rural Arizona is that the way the health system is set up in the state is you do not have large ICU units in the regionalized hospitals. Many of those hospitals are already full. And so our citizens, our community members are having to be airbacked down to larger health systems in the metropolitan area. And when they can no longer accept anybody else, the first individuals that are going to be told, no, sorry, there's no room. You have to stay at a facility where the treatment is going to be. And so I'm having a very hard time on how, and I've never seen something in a situation where there really isn't any gray area on this. We received thousands of emails, and I mean, it was pretty much split. You were either totally in support of our decision last Friday, or you were totally against our support. There was really no gray area whatsoever. And so I'm still having a hard time. How do we not take the opinion of the medical experts? I'm having a really hard time on how we do that. So then weighing that situation on top of looking at the motion that is made today, and I think that's going to create a very slippery slope for our board and future boards to deal with. And it could have a crippling response to our association. So that is a major concern of mine. I've also collected information from the 2A conference, and they would prefer that we do not make any further modifications. They would prefer that we continue with on January 18th, and they would prefer that, yes, individuals on the sidelines need to wear masks, but for this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Greer. And I believe Mr. Love is back. Mr. Love, can you continue?
yes, I don't know where you lost me. Xfinity is going to vote yes this time. And the reason why is I want to be able to give the schools themselves the choice of playing or not. But let me make something perfectly clear. With this yes vote, I am going to demand that we put a lot of protocols in place with consequences. And I want to guarantee that while our students are on our campuses playing these sports, that we make it as safe as possible. That's all, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Love. Appreciate your comments and logging back in. And to our final board member, I turn to Dr. Castile at this time.
Madam President and colleagues on the board. As I stated last week, participation in extracurricular coaches, our schools, and our districts. It's not a requirement. Athletics has so many benefits. It is an extension of the academic program. Challenges we have faced in this virtual environment is keeping our kids focused on their academics. My major concern addressed, as many others have said, the students are going to play in club sports or another the other issue creates a tremendous inequity for our families that are struggling. They can't afford the cost opportunities. And we have an inequity that truly concerns me. I'd like our schools, our communities to have the option to play the winter sports under the purview and the direction of the AIA. So I vote yes.
Thank you, Dr. Castile. And a vote. But to share a couple of thoughts, I don't know if I'm going to share something that has not been shared today. But as I have had much contemplation and a heavy heart, and please know that every single one of these board members truly has the best interests of our student athletes in mind. They are passionate, they are dedicated, and I respect all of those that have contributed, not only today, but through our medical advisory, our athletic trainers, I think it's a testimony of and the dedication and the concern that we all have for the student athletes that we serve. With that, and in contemplating, because of the current state that we are in, under our current leadership in our state, from the top down, at present, our schools have been given that autonomy. Previously, the athletics, I believe in that opportunity for our athletes. I believe and I concur that the safest place for our athletes to be involved in athletics is under the mitigation strategies that we have developed as an organization and through our medical advisory committee. The schools have a choice, and I believe that parents and I believe in families that they too have a choice to participate. While that may not be the popular opinion of many, I respect that choice, and I respect the unfortunate situation that we found ourselves in as an educational system within our state. And with that said, at this time, if there are no further comments from board members, I will call for a roll call vote in regard to the motion to continue comments. I see Mr. Greer. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, Madam President. We did have another vote also been being brought back in here that they would go ahead and continue as scheduled, just like the winter sports.
Hold on, you cut out. Go ahead, Mr. Hines.
Mr. Greer, that would be correct. We would include the Spirit line in that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do other board members have a question or comment? Dr. Munoz.
Thank you, President Corona. I just had a question for Mr. Hines. Is there any other modifications that you would like to bring forward this time as part of the proposal?
Dr. Munoz, yes, sir. Thank you very much for that. Board would be our current modifications that we have with a update at the direction of this board to include no fans at this time, no fans. Second recommendations, we have talked, it was part of the motion, but all students, coaches. Number 3 is each school will complete the AIA COVID-19 athlete coach monitoring form that has been shared but will be distributed to all schools. The day of a game or contest, the coach and captain meeting, they will exchange that lists the roster of their players, that they have met all the requirements that we have asked to participate, and in front of the official. That contest will not take place. And I think the last one I have is that any school that violates any of the mandatory modifications, including the updates and including the COVID-19 return to play form, will lose access to the AIA officials.
Madam President,
Yes, sir.
point of order, take a vote on the
Right.
reconsideration
Right.
Yes,
and then potentially look at other items if that's appropriate based on the vote.
yes, sir. I'd like to do
Right.
so at this time and move forward. So were there any other comments or questions in regard to the motion, the original motion of reconsideration? I can't see all board members, so you will have to unmute and let me know.
Janine Brandel, I call for the question.
Okay, question is uncalled. I will go through roll call. You will unmute and cast your vote, please. Mr. Williams,
Yes. Yes.
thank you. Dr. Castile,
Yes.
Mr. Duarte,
No.
Dr. Munoz, Mr. Love,
Yes.
Mr. Dean,
Yes.
Mr. Carter,
No.
and Mr. Greer.
No.
Okay. Chair has a vote of 5-4 in favor of winter sport 18th, and also a mask mandate in place during that competition. Motion passes. And Heinz shared with us that in communication with leadership, both conference and region leadership, it was noted, several staff and board has given Heinz your recommendation, sir, at this time. Are there any other modifications? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So my question is this, and I know we talked about Spirit Line being included, but since we dealt with it as a separate motion at our previous meeting, would it make sense at this point in time to go ahead and, sorry, that's my phone, of course. Would it be appropriate
Last week, I will entertain a motion for that at this.
to begin the same as winter sport?
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor in this case can, well, I'm going to have to go roll call because I can't see you. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Castile,
Yes.
Mr. Duarte, you can do thumbs up, sir, or thumbs down. Thank you,
You've got
sir. I can see you. Mr. Carter,
In light of the previous motion passing, I'll vote yes.
thank you. Mr. Greer.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, that's unanimous. 9-0. Thank you, Ms. Brandel. Now, back to our discussion
Wait,
regarding.
I don't think we gave Dr. Munoz a chance to.
Zach, I'm sorry.
It's okay, I'm easily overlooked. Yes, I support the motion.
Thank you. I was check marking things pretty quickly. So now we have unanimous. Thank you.
Madam
Mr.
President, I'll cast the final vote to make it unanimous.
Jeez.
Mr. Dean, there you go.
Thank you, Mr.
I told you this would be challenging. Looking at my list, I apologize to everyone. Okay, 9-0. Did I get everyone?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, we will continue our discussion put in place regarding winter sports.
Madam President,
Yes, sir.
again, in light of the previous motions passing, sure that the time period that has lapsed since the vote on Friday to today, that student athletes are held harmless for anything that they may have done during that time period thinking that the winter season was going to be canceled, that could put them in jeopardy of violation of rules.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. I concur. Mr. Hines, would you like to add anything to that? I don't believe we
No,
need a motion in that.
Athletic administrators that have a case, a situation that would be concerned, would communicate with Mr. Paddock or myself, and we would look at a fast track if that was to be in the case, and that we will work directly with that school. As Mr. Carter said, we should not put the onus on the athlete at this time for our decisions.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Thank you, Mr. Hines. And for those that at a later time in that regard.
I would like, just in discussion, and I think it's been brought up, and there are 16 other states that require masks to be played during, or to be worn during play of competition. And we have talked about this several times today. Athletics is a choice. And if a student makes the choice to play with their AIA school team, that a mask will be required. No exceptions. It is a choice. If you cannot, then we apologize, but there will be no exceptions from that. There will be masks being worn to protect all. And that is consistent with the 16 states across the country that have the same protocols or modifications in place.
Madam President, so that we can review those one more time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Hines.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The modifications, in addition to the current modifications that we have in place, would include the following. No fans at contests at this time. Number 2, all students, coaches, officials would be required to wear masks for the entirety of a game or contest. Again, as a voluntary organization and voluntary, whether athletes want to participate or not, mask will be required. Each school, number 3, each school will complete all games or contests and provide that form to all schools that day with a questionnaire and a sign off by the coach. And that will be exchanged at the captain's or coach's meeting prior to the contest. The official will oversee that exchange. If there is no exchange, the contest would not take place. Any school, number 4, any school that violates any of the mandatory modifications to AIA officiating, and our officials will be paying attention to that. In addition, not a modification, but would like to state that the kids do, based on our decision last Friday and a decision today, that kids are not put at risk for any potential violation of our bylaws at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Love has a question for us.
Yes, so what are we going to do? Let's say a school decides that they're not going to compete in sports. What are we going to do with the student that wants to leave that school and go to a school that does compete in sports? Is there a penalty to that student?
But if a school is not going to participate, a student is free to transfer to their closest school that does have a team, and they would be eligible immediately. However, if that student plays.
Love design.
Madam President,
It
Yes,
does.
Mr. Carter.
Okay.
some clarifying questions about fans.
Yes.
I'm supporting their students.
So the intent, Mr. Carter, is obviously any assigned personnel from the school to be in observance of that event and for the safety of the kids, that would be accepted. Also, the officials table for the scorekeeper and the clock manager. So that would be excluded. And I would make an exception if a team is traveling and their JV team travels with the varsity team, that they, and they're on the same bus, that they would be allowed to remain in mass, social distance during that other contest.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question is an exception for parents.
At this time, I would say no exception for parents due to the cases that we are dealing with now, but that we would evaluate that on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Do you have other thoughts, sir?
Yes, another clarifying question.
And the nose. A gaiter that can be brought from the neck and cover that area would be acceptable. A face shield would not be acceptable.
And Mr. Hines, just to clarify, staff and teachers and everybody can come to this. There are no fans. Those individuals that are in the gym playing, officiating, running the scorer's table, trainers, everyone is masked up. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. And nobody else is included in fans. Thank you. Do other board members have thoughts, discussion, or inquiry regarding those items that Mr. Hines has outlined?
Madam President, sorry to be asking all the questions, but I am concerned about not allowing parents to attend, and would like to hear some discussion, if possible, from the other board members about their views. My preference would be that that parents probably have a right to be in attendance.
Thank you. Ms. Brandel.
So I appreciate the aspect of a parent wanting and needing to be there, but I think it's important to note that a lot of us, our counties, have got restrictions on the numbers that can gather. And for Coconino County, even if we just allowed one parent per athlete, we would be well over our numbers. I'll also tell you, well, while we have had some different instances during other seasons of sport, parents don't necessarily follow the guidelines, and it becomes a frustrating issue for those of us trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And you know, I'd love to have parents there, but I think we've got to get to a place where we have better numbers. And, you know, I think back to my collegiate career. Granted, I played in a time where dinosaurs still roamed, but it was a situation, and respect and want parents to be there. I think they need to work with us and understand that right now our goal is to get athletes out there and playing. And that's what we want, and that's what we need to do.
Thank you, Ms. Brandel. Do we have other members of the board with thoughts? Dr. Munoz?
Yeah, thank you, President Corona. I just had a question on the start date for competitions. Did we say that would be next week, or is anything being pushed back?
At this time, it was the request to start on January 18th, which is next Monday, Dr. Munoz.
Okay, thank you.
Chime in if I have a board member that wants to discuss any of the points that have been.
I'm calling for the vote.
Mr. Love, I did not hear you.
I'm calling for the vote.
Did
I'm
you-
asking for the question.
He's
He's
calling
asking
for the question, Tony.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't have a
We don't
motion.
have a motion.
Yeah, we don't have a motion. This is just discussion that was brought up previously in regard to the other motion. And so, I mean, if we want a motion, I'll entertain one at this time.
Madam President, my suggestion would be that we may want to take these items one at a time, because I think there are probably at least a couple of items that there would be almost unanimous consent for. I see a couple of other items where we may need to have some more discussion, and if that's acceptable to you, I would be willing to make a motion for some of these items. So I would move that we approve the item dealing with the monitoring form and the return.
Moved and seconded that schools, both the visiting and homeschool, would be required to complete the COVID-19 monitoring form that they would be provided. You would then provide when you meet with the officials responsible for tracking that, and also the requirement that you must have, I call it the post-COVID return to play. Is that accurate regarding those two items that have been noted? Okay. Seeing or hearing none, then again, because of Zoom, I will have to go to roll call. Mr.
So
Williams.
May I ask the question, Ms. Corona?
Yes, sir.
So masks are already on the table, correct? Because that was part of the original motion.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Williams.
And then I would like to ask one more thing. Is there no in favor of following mandatory modifications?
I'm sorry, say that again, Mr. Hines.
So on the request that any schools that violate that, is there no interest in holding them accountable?
Mr. Carter, I'm going to lend to you because you
Madam-
elected to treat them separately. And at this time, my understanding is you lumped two of them together, the COVID and also the post-COVID, to address just that right now.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yes, ma'am. That is what I would prefer
Okay.
for this particular motion.
Okay,
Thank you. So just to clarify, again, the motion to continue with winter sports has passed. Mandatory mask mandate has passed as part of that original motion. And the motion on the floor right now is the COVID-19 mandatory form that schools would be required to complete, as well as the website under our modifications. If there's no further discussion, I will call for your vote on this. Mr. Williams. Thank you. That was a yes. Dr. Castile.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Duarte. Thank you. Mr. Munoz. Dr. Munoz. Thank you. That's a yes. Ms. Brandel, come back to that one. Mr. Dean.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Greer.
Yes.
And I don't know, we might have lost Mr. Love. Well, I will have a point of clarification when Mr. Love comes back on. Motion will pass at this point, whether it's 9081 to, okay. So the other item that was noted and recommended by Mr. Hines is in regard to schools violating. There's on record. I would like to know your vote, sir, in regard to those two items.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you.
I vote yes.
Thank you, sir. So Ms. Taylor Cody, that's 9-0. So going back to the other item at hand, Mr. Hines, is in relation to the violation. Consequences would be either officials that would be pulled from that particular contest and discussion on part of the board members. Do we move forward? Do we discuss this further?
Madam President, I would move to, in regard to that matter.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay,
Madam
so
President.
thank you, Mr. Love. It's been moved and seconded. Motion by Mr. Carter, seconded by Mr. Love. And Mr. Hines, I'm going to relate to you. I've got,
Including initiating.
thank you. I will open up for discussion. And one final call for any other discussion, again, hoping that I'm not missing anybody. Dr. Munoz.
I just want clarification. Thank you, President Corona, from Mr. Hines. So the enforcement of this is going to be based on the self-reporting of the schools or officials or all of above?
Mr. Greer.
And then just also a point of clarification, on a game day, if officials show up and they find a school that is
Be paid for their time to go there.
Mr. Hines, could take it one step further, maybe give us a little bit more information and rationale regarding this particular motion, sir.
I think that this board has set including the medical. Do not want, excuse me, you asked a little bit for rationale. I was kind of the mask police communicating with schools during the fall. And without this necessarily in place as a required modification.
Thank you. Mr. Greer.
I just have one question, and this kind of goes back to the mask mandate. Are we at all worried that by passing that, we have created a situation now that our schools, because a lot of schools have told us they do not want further modifications, that they're going to just go ahead and go play clubs, kind of the wild, wild west?
Well, there was no season of sport. We have an out of season rule that would allow them to do that. But if we have a season of sport, then they are no.
I know our board members are pondering at this time. Is there any?
I'm sorry. Madam President, can I just interject one thing?
Yes, sir.
I know that there's some questions that why has it changed from the fall to the winter? It's very obviously during the fall, we met the metrics, which were about 10 times less than they were at this time. So comparing the fall to right now is like recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. So this will be my last call in regard to hearing from board members, whether there are questions or. Mr. Williams, what say ye? Yes, Dr. Castile?
I heard the yes.
Yes.
I
okay.
saw the yes.
Yeah, I saw the yes. Mr. Duarte? Thank you. Yes. Dr. I'll come back. Mr. Dean? I saw you. Yes. Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Sir, and back to Mr. Love. Or you can turn your video on and give me a mouth of a yes or a no or thumbs up, Mr. Love. Video back. I know we've discussed at length many things today. One, namely reinstating the way COVID monitoring, mandatory return to play, and also regarding violations of these particular. Anything else that the board members, if there's not a motion or anything else they'd like to discuss, Mr. Hines, I have a few things that I would like to address to our membership and our public
Okay,
the winter season.
Madam President, the only other thing is the last thing that we probably need to vote on is fans.
Okay, my apologies.
Madam President,
Right.
Yes, sir.
to provide a motion and to see where the board is, my motion would be that we not allow fans with the exception of 2 parents per athlete if state and local guidelines are followed. dealing with the number of people in attendance in the facility.
Okay, thank you. So the motion on the floor made by Mr. Carter is that we permit fans with the exception of only 2 parents if state and local guidelines permit, correct?
Yes.
Do we have a second for that?
I
motion?
I think
I'll
we need to
second.
clarify. I
Thank you.
think I'm sorry.
Go
I
ahead,
think we
Mr.
need to
Hyde.
clarify, county or my area does not require masks, so I'm not going to follow that. My point is that we are following county or city ordinances based on number of people allowed in an indoor or outdoor setting. Is that, Tim, what you're making reference to?
Well, my motion is that there would be no fans
Yes,
except for 2 parents per athlete if the facility
okay,
is authorized by the local jurisdiction to whatever that number is. If that number is 20, then that's it. If that number is 50, if that number is 100, but it would be based on their current rule about the number of people that can be at an event.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
unfortunately, I guess that would almost be a first come, first served deal. I mean, if you can only have 50 people in the building and you've got 30 athletes and coaches, maximum number would be.
thank you, Mr.
Thank
Carter.
you. Based on an actual number of bodies in a facility, and still with the understanding, Mr. Carter, if you're okay with that, so those individuals and fans that count for you correctly, Mr. Carter, and clarify.
Madam President, you did. I didn't include anything about a mask because that was already a given. So if the parents are going to be in attendance, they will wear masks just like everyone else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted a point of clarification in that regard, because there are some areas around our state, unfortunately, that have 0 mandates regarding masks. And so I wanted to make sure our language was clear.
Yeah,
So-
my motion,
Allow fans with basically to allow 2 fans, guidelines permit them in the facility based on the population and numbers. Mr. Greer had a second to that. Is there any question or further discussion by board members?
At the risk of adding to the length of the meeting, I will ask about AIA passes. This would continue to exclude AIA passes, right? We're just talking about parents.
At this time, yes, sir.
Local schools, how they want to handle that. I believe our athletic directors did an excellent job of communicating with each other when some sites did not have fans, others did. While for many of us, it was a logistic nightmare. I believe by and large, our athletic administrators really communicated well, Mr. Dean, in that regard. And they would then, as a local site, also set if there's a charge to get into the game as well. And I know that that was a concern for some of our member schools as this entire pandemic has taken and it made an impact on our budgets. And so I just want that noted. Is there any other questions?
I'm just following some of the things in the chat. I just want to make sure that everybody understands my motion was not for 2.
Board members, any other discussion or clarifications?
Dean,
Just want to clarify, this is for home and away both?
Yes.
upon the host school,
Correct.
whether or not they allow fans.
Which I believe Mr. Carter's general motion of state and local, the local falls under that of the school. Correct, Mr. Carter? And if they
I
are,
believe that's correct. So if I need to clarify the motion, it would primarily support the parents at their home facility.
thank you, Mr. Carter.
Again, at the risk of adding length, just a couple of points of clarification here. So in the fall, in my school district, we cleared the gym between every level of sport for volleyball. So When the freshmen finished playing, we cleared the gym. When the JV finished playing, we cleared the gym. I would encourage schools, if this motion passes, to name, or else you start to stack the number of parents up in your gym, and those numbers could get large quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Dean, for that.
Mr. Hines, do you?
No, I think everything that has been stated is well said.
Okay. All right. We will now take a vote in regard to the, just encompassing the permission of 2 parents per athlete at a home site. And just to clarify, point of clarification, that's determined by the home site, local and state guidelines. Mr. Williams. Thank you. That's yes. Dr. Castillo.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, I'm coming.
Okay, Mr. Duarte. Thank you. Dr. Munoz.
Just want to make a point of clarification. It's parents or guardian, 2 parents or guardians on that, so that in the verbiage.
Okay.
But yes, my vote is yes.
Yes, sir, that would be correct.
Thank you. Ms. Brandel. Ms. Brandel.
I'm thinking.
Oh, okay, sorry. I didn't know if you were frozen. I can come back to you.
No, please.
Mr. Love.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Dean.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Munoz, for the clarification that
Yes.
parents do include guardians. Yes.
Mr. Greer.
Yes.
Thank you. I can't remember. Billy, did I catch you? Thank you. And back to you, Ms. Brandel.
Beings is how the decision is left up to the individual schools and they can still say no fans. I'll say yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 9-0. I would.
Madam President, that is all the modifications that I had.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams also has a question.
Mr. Williams. Yes, sir.
Yes, I apologize. Thank you, Madam President. I apologize if I missed it, but from January 8th until present, is there going to be a hold harmless for those students that may have done something else with then cancellation? And then the 14-day requirement, school district or school started sports. Can we just get clarification on that? Because I know it's going to be asked. Thank you.
My recommendation, Madam President, is that that period from last Friday to today be handled within the office, and that the students are held harmless for that. There does not need to be enough kids.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Hines, there's a couple of other items that I would like you to clarify for those that are on and media. And I know these are just modifications and we don't need action as a board, but can you speak in regard to Spirit Line at games?
So at a home game, Spirit Line is in most of our schools is not a competition. It is a student activity that supports the program. That at the home site, the school could allow the Spirit Line to be there for their team at this time.
Thank you. And can you also address, Mr. Hines, one more entity, that is the media?
Media will need to communicate if they would like to attend a game with the school athletic director and get permission from the athletic director where they could be, and they will be social distance wearing a mask at an event so that the school can limit the number of people that are at that game.
Thank you.
Madam President, may I ask another question? Going back to who might be in the facility, local, is that another issue that we might want to try to address or not?
He's posed the question to board members. I will entertain a discussion on it. Certainly a point to note that it will come up amongst our athletic directors.
Media, we need to get permission from the school athletic director to attend. Is that not accurate?
Yes, sir.
That was my memory as well, Mr. Dean.
That's what I recollect.
So deferring to our athletic directors, do you think that sufficiently satisfies that issue?
In my mind, yes, Mr. Carter.
Okay, so my understanding then based on that is that a member of the media who wants to cover that game simply needs to make sure that they have approval from the athletic director, and it's their determination at that point. Is that correct?
That's the way I understand it.
Okay, thank you. I think that'll probably be sufficient.
Okay. Do any of our, Dr. Munoz?
Wanted to add to that permission piece with the media. President Corona is college scouts that may want to come to view a game, that they also get permission from the athletic director.
I think that's reasonable, sir.
Yes, sir.
Not too much to ask.
There's going to be a number of questions that come up over the next couple days, and that we all just gather them up. We do have a meeting next week, so forward them on to Mr. Hines so that they can be prepared to address them. I can't imagine that we're going to all be inundated with questions, so to try to answer them all here probably isn't the best timing.
Thank you for that, Dr. Castillo.
Thank you. Regarding today and moving forward, or any other items from the floor, board members, regarding winter athletics?
Madam President, just one more comment.
Yes, sir.
You've done an amazing job running a very difficult meeting. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. I'm a little scattered sometimes, got lots of notes. I have to reiterate that. Thank you all for your patience. It is very challenging running this board meeting from a Zoom standpoint when you cannot see people face to face. And so I just appreciate everyone's patience as we have navigated through this. If there is no other items from the floor, Mr. Hines, I will turn it over to you. But I first want to speak very candidly. Have many parents, many of which have made a lot of comments in our chat today, numerous emails that have sent to us, and the questions will continue to arise from parents, ADs, a variety of sources. Today, very difficult decisions were made and rendered. And I implore and ask our schools and our families and our athletic directors, it is disheartening to hear and receive survey and feedback as board members that our schools and our families and our communities, they want so badly to participate and play. But yet, they push aside those mitigations and protocols that we have moving forward. Whether you are in the opinion and agreement of moving forward or any of the motions and mitigations, integrity and understanding for your local administrators, understanding for those that serve our student athletes, all was done in the best interest of our students and to provide that opportunity of which our membership asked for, our families and our parents and our kids asked for. Thank you to the kids that sent, the students around the state of Arizona. I read your emails, as many board members do. We appreciate you reaching out. And with that, I just encourage everyone to stay well, stay healthy, And please work together as we continue to traverse through this difficult time in this pandemic. There are no right answers. But if we work together and mitigate and do the best we can, I believe that we can be successful in the long run. Thank you, guys. Mr. Hines, I will turn it over to you for any other comments from your end, sir.
Well, I'll be brief, but I appreciate the input of this board today. Reiterate that this was extremely challenging, and the decisions are not made lightly. And the amount of respect I have for all 10 members of this board, you all know that, but I appreciate greatly what you do and what you do for our membership. Asking the public to adhere to and follow the modifications and the requirements that we put into place. And here's the thing, bottom line, we're trying to help kids. I think all of us as adults need to do what we can to help with this cause to reduce the numbers and think of our fellow man, as I believe it was said earlier. So with that, I really appreciate everybody. We've spent a lot of time on that today. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And if I could just implore those that are listening in our communities, if you have suggestions, please do so in a constructive manner to staff and to board members as we move forward, because we do appreciate your input and appreciate courteous manner in which that's provided to us and your local athletic directors. If there is no other discussion at this time, Ms. Brandel, you're muted, ma'am.
Sorry, just a quick question. Will schedules be restored this afternoon by Mr. Belitho?
To make those public again.
Thank you.
And I may be overstepping my bounds, but Mr. Hines and I have discussed, I know our athletic directors are going to have some clarification questions moving forward, and there will be additional, perhaps another follow-up meeting, as Mr. Hines and I talked.
12,000 plus contests, 26,000 plus officials. So that will be done within the next hour.
Thank you for all you and your team do for us. It is appreciated.
Thank you, Janine.
Thank you all. So seeing no and hearing no other motions from the floor, I thank you all for your time. I thank you to those that joined in today and ask that we move forward again with safety and integrity and well-being of not just our student athletes, but our entire state in mind. And so I will entertain a motion to adjourn at this time.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms.
Second.
Blundell.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Castile. All those in favor, please indicate.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.